Opening credits. Desired by Two Dragons. Menage Shifter Paranormal Romance. By Selena Coffey. Auto-narrated, using Google technology. Chapter 1. Hannah, you must go to Furth. I am Wald. You must find Nathan Luther. He is the only one that can save you. As Hannah reached for her mother, she started to float away, always near but never close enough to touch. Why couldn't she ever reach her mother? Straining to reach her, pushing against the incredible weight that seemed to hold her down, Hannah stretched her arm out until she was sure it would dislocate if she went any further. Nathan Luther, Hannah. Nathan Luther. As her mother finally floated away into the ether, Hannah woke from the dream that had been plaguing her ever since her mother passed away. Pushing her black hair back from her face, she looked around her dark room. Seriously, Mum? This is how you haunt me? Why are you still haunting me anyway? You've been dead for 3 months now. I have no idea who Nathan Luther is. The internet has no idea who Nathan Luther is. If the internet says they don't exist, well then they must not exist. She spoke out loud, knowing that if her mother had actually been present, she'd have never spoken to her that way. Hannah wasn't actually sure if her mother really was haunting her. Perhaps it was her own psyche, her own thoughts harassing her while she slept, leftover guilt for not being there when her mother slipped away in her sleep. She was starting to think the dream wasn't going to leave her alone. Not until she went there. Going to her mobile phone, she flicked through screens until she found her banking application. Logging in, she saw that her balance was finally in the positive. Her small inheritance from her mother wasn't enough that she could term herself as rich, but at least she wasn't going to starve for a while. Curious, she looked up flights to the nearest airport to Furth. I am Wald, and saw that she could get a hotel and a flight for less than some of her friends spent on a weekend out to the city. Making a snap decision, she booked the flight and the hotel, and suddenly realized she wasn't even sure which date the flight was for. Looking at her mobile again, she saw she had less than 24 hours to pack and get ready. She thought about her best friend, Annie, as she started going through her clothes. She's going to be so chuffed. I'm going on an adventure on my own. Or in a mood. One of the two, but oh well, I'm going, she said as she giggled to herself. You are going to Germany in a few hours? On your own? With all of those hot guys, the even hotter women, and without me? You little cow. I take it that means you're just a little shocked? Hannah replied to Annie. They were sitting in a pub not far from Hannah's apartment, having a pint before Hannah left for her trip to the airport. Hannah smiled at her blonde-haired friend. Annie's brown eyes had lit up when Hannah told her what was happening, and she seemed really happy, adding to Hannah's own sense of excitement. Just a bit, love. Just a bit. What brought this on? Annie asked, taking a sip of her drink. You'll laugh, you really will. That or send me away. Hannah said with a laugh, but growing serious, thinking about how to word what was happening. I've been dreaming about Mum a lot. She's the one that told me to go to Germany. I'd never even heard of Furth. I am Wald until I started dreaming about her. So I looked it up. It's famous for dragons apparently. I dismissed it, but I keep having the dream over and over every night, so I finally gave in. All right, I see why you're rushing off then. A bit creepy, but it seems that either your dear old mum or your brain is telling you to go. Just make sure you call me every day. Annie looked at Hannah sternly, but her face brightened as she cracked a smile. How are you getting there? Do you want me to drive you down? That would be great, actually. I was just going to take the train, but that takes ages, doesn't it? Thank you so much, and thank you for supporting me. I really do appreciate it. Hannah smiled at her friend. For the first time, she was starting to feel nervous about her decision. Some friends of Annie's came in, and Hannah drifted into her own quiet world, imagining scenarios of what might happen when she got to Germany, wondering if there'd be pitchforks and burning torches in her future. Dismissing the thought, Hannah reminded herself Germany no longer lived in the Dark Ages. They didn't burn witches anymore. Hannah's flight went well, and she checked into her room without any problems. She loved the town, combining old world and new to create a unique culture that Hannah adored. She took a quick nap before heading out to explore, only to wake up panting because, yet again, her mum had been in the dream. This time, she'd been telling Hannah to go to the Dragon's Inn. Great, she said to herself. At least Mum's saying something different now, I suppose. Hannah had spent most of the flight asking herself just exactly what she was doing. Losing her mind, she suspected, but she'd resolved to pay attention to what was going on in her dreams since they'd brought her here. Going down to the front desk, she asked if anybody knew how to get to the Dragon's Inn. One of the girls there looked a bit confused that Hannah had asked for directions, but gave her what she asked for. Dismissing the odd looks, Hannah left the hotel and went out in search of the place that she at least knew existed. Taking her time, she wandered the streets she'd been directed to go down and finally reached her destination. She understood the looks now. It was the German equivalent of a biker bar in America. Shiny chrome and black motorcycles lined the front. Loud music seemed to roll out of the inside, and loud voices seemed to be roaring over each other. Hannah looked down at the white linen dress she had on, the sandals that were serviceable for walking but still pretty, and wondered once again if she'd lost her mind. She wasn't really going to go in there? Hannah pulled her shoulders back, took a deep breath, and thought that this is where her mother wanted her to go. She must have a reason for it. Taking one more breath, Hannah tucked her handbag against her side and walked in. Everybody in the place went quiet, staring at her. Lovely, one of those places. Chapter 2. Staring back, Hannah saw denim and black leather everywhere her gaze fell. Even the chairs were covered in denim and black leather. The tables were all painted black, with the yellow head of a dragon stylized in the middle. Biting her lip, looking momentarily terrified, and a second away from fleeing, Hannah heard a voice calling her name, and looked over at the bar. Two blonde gods stood there, beckoning her to them with a smile. At this point, Hannah had fled to Germany in an attempt to appease either her brain or her dead mother. She still wasn't sure which she believed. She was in a biker bar in a strange country, and now two of the most gorgeous men she'd ever seen in her life were calling her name, wanting her attention. Either the whole thing was completely implausible, or she was dreaming. She didn't feel as though she was dreaming. She was starting to believe her mother really was haunting her. To hell with it, maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation as to how these two men knew who she was. Perfectly reasonable, she assured herself. Plastering a smile on her face, steeling herself once more, Hannah walked over to the two men that were apparently the barmen. She sat down on a black leather-covered stool, feeling almost guilty for sitting on the yellow dragon head, and smiled at the men. Looking at them expectantly, waiting on the explanation, Hannah was shocked when they spoke. "You've made it then, great. We can get started." A man with jade-green eyes spoke in a tone that implied she'd understand what he was on about. "She looks a bit confused, Nathan. Perhaps she doesn't know what's going on." This man had eyes that were such a light shade of brown they were almost yellow. Those eyes were smiling at Hannah, asking for her trust without speaking the words. For some reason, she wanted to give him whatever he asked for. The men spoke in barely accented English, conversing easily with Hannah. If she could make her
censored
work, that was. She kept staring at them. They were tall, sexy, muscular gods. Both appeared to be in their early 30s, more than likely, with killer smiles stretching their faces. The only similarities were their style of clothing, and the tattoos their arms were covered with. Intricate patterns that made no real sense unless you followed the lines, an image beginning to form, but their black t-shirts covered most of the shape. Hannah wanted to find out what was beneath those shirts, and not just to see the tattoos. Nathan apparently hid
censored
rings under his t-shirt from what she could see of the outlines there. He also had a darker shade of blonde hair than the other one did. Slowly, after some staring, Hannah realized the yellow-eyed man had called the green-eyed man Nathan, and reality exploded in her brain. Now, why did she suspect the other's name was going to be Luther? A sense of doom had Hannah tensing in her seat. Her life was so far out of control right now. She thought it might be best to go check herself into hospital. Panic evident in her eyes, on her face, and in the rapid pace of her breathing. Hannah was on the verge of bolting out of the door again, when the other one placed his hand over hers and made soothing sounds to her. Instantly she calmed, a sense of peace encircling her the way his large hand encircled her tiny one. "You have a pianist's hands, Hannah. Do you play?" he asked, kindness in his eyes. Yes, I do." "How do you know my name?" "How do you two know me?" she asked, bewilderment evident in her voice. She was calm, but she still felt lost, confused, and totally out of place. "We have a story to tell you. I suspect you already know my name, but I will introduce myself to you anyway, because I don't believe you've been told anything about us except that you needed to find us. I am Luther Harmon. My overeager friend here is Nathan Carls." Luther paused to gesture to his friend, who was staring at Hannah with a severe case of, "I want to eat you whole," coming loud and clear from his body language. Instead of being repulsed, however, Hannah felt a stirring response within her own body, a bring it on wanting to escape from her lips. Clamping down on that feeling, she turned her attention back to Luther. That didn't really help when she could see the same attraction there, only his version had been clamped down on and was being throttled into submission. The longer she was with these two, the stranger her thoughts were. She seemed to be noticing things she'd have never noticed before. She could almost, she thought, hear what they were thinking. Almost. An image of herself, bent over the bar,
Censored.
and writhing with an image of Luther's hands on her hips, flashed into her brain, and Hannah gasped, covering her face. She knew it was Luther by the swirling tattoo that snaked up the outside portion of his left hand. "Sorry about that, it slipped through, I guess." Luther looked guilty but then made his face blank, closing his eyes as he visibly took back control of his brain. "Okay, somebody has to explain this to me, and they have to start explaining now," Hannah exclaimed, starting to become angry rather than panicked. Something strange was happening. She wasn't actually going crazy, and these two had the answers. She wanted those answers, and she wanted them now. Apparently her glare wasn't as intimidating as she thought, because Luther just smiled at her, and Nathan somehow looked hungrier. Raising her left eyebrow, she stared at Nathan. He backed down. "Oh wow," she thought, "that worked." She squinted at him, and she could have giggled when his head went down, looking up at her with pitiful puppy dog eyes. Thrilled with what had just occurred, she looked over at Luther and remembered what she was here for. Answers, not obedience training. Right. Back to it then. "So what do you know?" she asked Luther. "Let me get someone in here to take over the bar, and we can talk in our office, all right?" "Won't be a second." Turning back to Nathan, she looked him over again. She wondered what those
Censored.
rings did for him. Picturing him
Censored.
beneath her as she tugged on them, brought a dreamy smile to her face. Moving her eyes to meet his, she noticed he looked to be in a lot of pain. "You have to stop thinking like that if you want me to control myself, Hannah," he rasped out. It sent shivers down her spine, but at the same time his words made her eyes widen. "How did you know what I was thinking?" she said as she leaned over the bar towards him, wanting to pull him to her for privacy's sake. He stepped away, dodging her question for the moment as well. Luther came back just then, saving him from giving an answer. Before she could glare at Nathan again, he practically ran back to the office Luther had indicated, as a woman with long purple hair came over to take their place. Looking the woman over, Hannah thought the woman was rather fit, but Luther pulled her along with him to the back of the office. "Down, girl. Talk first, play later." "Maybe," he told her, his hand wrapped over hers. It sent shivers up her arm, straight to somewhere she'd rather not think about at the moment. Giggling, she followed him. "All right, what's happening to me? Somebody has got to explain this. I'm far too serious most days to be sat around giggling like a teenager." "What's going on?" she asked the men seated on a couch across from her. Luther had led her to a chair so she could face them but not be between them. She'd thought it was so she would feel more comfortable, but looking at them she wondered. They looked nervous, tense even. "Do you know anything about Dragonkin? Did your parents ever tell you anything, or leave anything behind in the case of your father?" Nathan asked her, looking calmer now there was some distance between them. No, my father died when he was 28, almost the same age as me now. He died on his birthday, in fact. I've never known much about his family, Mum simply wouldn't talk about him. What are dragonkin? She asked them, looking from one to the other questioningly. Oh, this is going to be much more difficult then. Tell me, how did you arrive here? Luther queried. Honestly, insanity would have to be the word for it. My mother passed away not long ago, and from that first day she's been haunting me. Well, my dreams at least. At first all she would say to me in the dream was, Furth, I am Wald. Then, just before I came, she told me I had to find Nathan Luther. Night after night I was having these dreams. I thought it was just my brain, but here you are, Nathan and Luther, not Nathan Luther. You're in Furth, I am Wald, just as she told me. And there is some really strange shit taking place here. We're reading each other's minds, aren't we? Luther looked at her with some sympathy, knowing what he was going to tell her next wasn't going to be easy for her to take. Right, so you don't know anything. Nathan and I are dragonkin. We can turn into dragons at will. We share a bond with you, as we have with all of your father's line. We've been waiting for this day for a long time. We've been watching you grow up since the day he died. You are the last of your family line. We either break the curse with you, or it goes on to any children you may produce. Hannah's response was far from eloquent. Huh? Pulling their shirts over their heads, the men revealed that the tattoos that snaked around their arms, Nathan's left and Luther's right, were parts of the tail of a very large, elaborate dragon tattoo. The body ran across their backs, down below their belts, but the head was on there.
Censored.
Everything on the dragons looked like normal ink and skin, but the detail was fine, the scales of each creature picked out with extraordinary skill. The eyes of each dragon were what really caught her attention. They glowed. They were the same color as their wearer's eyes, almost like real eyes but not quite. The dragons seemed to slither and move beneath each man's skin, only an impression, but somehow she knew those tattoos were really the dragons within each man. Hannah almost knocked her chair over in her attempt to flee the room, but Nathan caught her. We aren't here to hurt you, Hannah, we're here to protect you. I swear we will not hurt you. Nathan attempted to calm her, but his touch only made her senses swim, the panic increasing inside of her. She slumped. Nathan caught her before she hit the floor. Well, that's just great, Luther, you made her faint. I hope you're happy with yourself. Nathan placed Hannah gently on the couch, pushing her hair out of her face. I think we're going to have to do this a little differently than we'd planned on. It seems her mother hid a lot of truths from her daughter. Shall we begin? This may be the only way. I just hope she doesn't wake up freaking out even more than she already is. That's a lot of knowledge to just wake up knowing. It hasn't always worked out well for us in the past. Luther looked worried, but sat beside Hannah, placing her head in his lap as he folded her hands around her head. Nathan went to her feet, placing them in his own lap, placing his hands over them gently. Both men had an instantaneous reaction to the woman touching them, a product of their bond. Deep attraction was always a possibility, with meeting one of the cursed for dragonkin. It didn't always happen, and neither had felt it as strongly as they did with Hannah. She was special, this cursed one, and they both wanted to be gentle. Both men started to chant words that did not sound like words, merely syllables and whispers that may have been sounds. A green glow began to surround all three of the bodies on the couch, swirling as though it were animated fog, a living being itself. The fog came from Nathan and Luther, but as it swirled it drifted to Hannah's lips, drifting between them slowly. Hannah's eyes popped open, taking in a deep breath as the fog started to pour into her.
Censored.
As though it were her very life's blood and not memories and time. The stream slowed, disappearing as it entered Hannah's body. Her eyes closed, and she seemed to peacefully go back to sleep. Nathan and Luther knew what was really happening, however. She was assimilating their memories and thoughts for the last 500 years. Leaving her, Nathan and Luther went out to check on the bar. Nathan agreed to go back and stay with her. Luther would stay at the front, helping Nadia, the purple-haired vixen at the bar. Nathan watched over her, knowing the things she was learning because they came from his own memories. The people of his past, the things he'd done, the things he'd seen and experienced. The reason her family was cursed. Nathan drifted with her, though for different reasons, reliving 500 years in less than an hour. Going back to his youth, when he'd been a young dragonkin. He remembered enticing the youngest princely son of the King of Bavaria to cross over to Bohemia with him. Luther coming along only to keep an eye on the pair and to hopefully keep them out of trouble. They'd spent 3 days carousing, burning fields, and flying all over the two kingdoms, causing mayhem. Assumptions were made on both sides. The Bavarians accused the Bohemians of setting the dragons on them and kidnapping the son. The Bohemians blamed the Bavarians for the dragons' destructive rampage, and the three culprits hid, hoping it would all just blow over. That didn't happen, and there was a battle between the two kingdoms. The young prince, Gunther, had tried to go back home but was killed in the battle. His body returned to his father. His Bohemian wife returned to her father, taking their young child with her. The Bavarian king cursed the family, the line that would follow with the child, for the betrayal of the Bohemians, and through the generations, the descendants of young Gunther met their deaths before or on their 28th birthday. Every single one died, and Luther and Nathan had been attempting ever since to break the curse. They had one last chance with Hannah. If they broke the curse, they would no longer be dragons, she would not die, and they would all live a normal life. Their efforts had to work this time. Time travel was a drastic step, but she was the last one, their last chance. They had to succeed this time. Hannah broke his reverie by screaming as she sat straight up on the sofa. "Holy freaking hell! What have you done?" she screamed while holding her head between her hands. Nathan could hear Luther running to the office as he held Hannah, reassuring her that the pain would pass, that she was going to be okay. She was crying hysterically. Nathan thought that might partially be from the last few months of grief, confusion and pain, not simply a side effect of what they'd done. Luther slid behind her, running his hand up her dress, trying to soothe her by rubbing her back. She could hear the music coming from the bar, a thumping driving beat that soothed her instead of making her feel fractious. She let her head fall back against Luther's shoulder, let the memories flow through her brain, feeling him breathe behind her, seeing Nathan breathing before her slowly in and out. Let it all go, let it fall into place, she thought. Slowly all of the information from two men came together into her brain, forming a solid idea. Her neck muscles relaxed and the urge to run screaming calmed. "We have to go back in time then?" she asked the men quietly. "Yes, the sooner the better." "Your birthday's in 2 weeks, isn't it?" Luther asked behind her, his lips brushing her ear. His hands had moved to her front now, rubbing down her ribs, over her hips and back up again. Distracting, implausibly.
Censored.
The feel of his skin against her silken skin was overly stimulating, exciting. Nathan at her feet, rubbing them, somehow sending shivers up to her spine, giving her ideas she shouldn't be having now. "If you keep thinking like that, Hannah," he murmured against her ear, the sound not helping, only making more images appear in her mind, "we won't be going anywhere tonight. We'll be
Censored.
on this couch, all three of us, and I don't know that you're quite ready for that. So get up, go back to your hotel, and tomorrow morning we'll come get you, all right? We have to get things ready for this. I'll call you a taxi." He
Censored.
her ear as he finished speaking, his
Censored.
sliding down the outer shell, biting at the lobe, making her squirm against him. "Your own thoughts aren't helping, Luther, let her up, come on before I ravish both of you," Nathan said out loud to them, his teeth clenched. Her feet were pressed into him, the hardness beneath her toes, difficult to not identify. She sucked her breath in, wanting to discover more about the images that kept flashing in her mind. Flashes of tangled bodies, sighs and moans filling the air, hands moving and bodies writhing. Yes, she needed out of here, or she might end up doing something she'd never considered before. Luther seemed to be the first to get a hold on his passion as he jumped up, using a mobile to call a taxi for Hannah. He gave them the bar's address, gathered her things, and took her to front. Nathan had written some things on a paper and handed them to her, putting them in her hand with a gentle
Censored.
on her cheek. Luther handed her a shot of something from behind the bar, and she swallowed it quickly, letting the burn calm her nerves. He handed her one more, and she tossed that one back too, knowing she may need it if she wanted to sleep tonight. A flash of lights outside announced the arrival of her taxi, and she turned to go. Hannah, Luther called out to her, "I'll buzz you in the morning, all right?" "I'll be waiting for your call," she assured him with a smile, then walked out of the door, a little wobbly in the sandals she'd put back on her feet. Thinking she needed one more drink, she went into the little shop at the hotel, brought a small bottle of whiskey, and went to her room with a full ice bucket in hand. Time to assimilate. Chapter 3. Hannah woke up early, the sun barely above the horizon as she cracked her eyes open. Maybe she'd had too much whiskey. Maybe. Shutting her eyes, she pushed herself up and ran for the shower, hoping some hot water would make her head feel better. As the water poured over her head, she thought about the things she now knew. Because of the curse, she could see the things that popped into Luther and Nathan's minds as they could hers. They were connected, that's what caused the
censored
attraction, but beyond that, she found them both incredibly sexy with their soft denim and black leather. They both found her delicious, tall, elfin and beautiful, with an edge beneath the timidity that she'd been showing the world. They wanted to bring out her inner kitten, and turn her into a full-grown hellcat apparently. But first they had to save her and themselves from their individual fates. She knew what they thought of her, what they knew, and they were learning the same things about her but more slowly. She accepted it all, what else she could do after the last few hours. Last night, Hannah had been overwhelmed, not sure how to deal with the things she discovered. She'd finished off a good portion of the bottle of whiskey, but falling asleep had taken more time than she'd hoped. She was anxious to get started, and hoped the men were early risers too. Getting out of the shower, she dried off, putting on jeans, a black sweater and trainers, not sure what day was going to bring but wanting to be functional. She ran to her phone as it started to buzz, flicking it to answer. "Hannah," she heard from her speaker. It was Annie. Oh dear, she'd completely forgotten to call her friend last night. "Hi Annie. I'm so sorry I forgot to call you. I met a really hot pair of guys and spent the night, well, not doing what I wanted to, but it was interesting to say the least." She just blurted it, not sure what to actually tell her friend at this point. "Oh, do tell, Hannah, you have to tell," her friend purred down the line. "Not much to tell at this point, but I'm meeting them again this evening, so if I don't call you tonight, don't panic, all right? I'm waiting on them to call now." "Well, I expect pictures and a text later, at the least, all right? How's the other stuff going?" Annie asked, concerned. Hesitating only a moment, Hannah replied, "I've put it on the back burner for now. I'll explain more later on. They're calling me now, so let me go, all right? Love you, buddy." She hung up before Annie could reply, wanting to answer the other call before they hung up. She thought it must be them. She'd not entered anyone else's phone information into her phone under the name of
censored.
She must have done that when she was drunk. "Eek, I'll have to fix that," she told herself. "Hello," she said, an almost frantic tone in her voice, afraid she'd miss them. "Good morning, Hannah. How are you?" the voice asked over her speakerphone. Reeling out of this world? No, those weren't good answers. Fine. She was fine. "I'm all right, Luther. How are you?" "Anxious to start the day. Shall we pick you up this morning? Say around a half hour from now. Get something to eat, then we'll head out," he told her. "Where are we going?" Picking up her bag, she was already heading down to the cafe at the bottom of the hotel for something to fill her belly with before heading out. "A castle, darling, where else? Be ready, we'll be there soon." He hung up the phone, and she smiled as she slipped the phone into her back pocket. So bossy. She pictured him behind her again, his hands wrapped in her hair, telling her to take what he was giving her. Her knees actually went weak as she waited for the elevator. Then her phone buzzed in her back pocket. "Stop thinking those things, Hannah. I'm about to start driving. Be a good girl now, and let me get to you. Then we'll talk about what you just thought, Elle." Grinning, she put the phone back and went down to the cafe. She had some orange juice and some scrambled eggs with toast, and took a coffee out to a table outside after eating to wait for the fellas. The sun was shining, and it was a beautiful day in Germany. Raising her face to the sky, she inhaled clean air and the smell of baked goods as her skin warmed. She heard the roar of a motorcycle, and looked in the direction it came from. Luther and Nathan were on separate bikes, of course, each with a helmet and a leather jacket on. A smile spread over her face uncontrollably. She giggled when she saw Nathan wobble a little, when she thought about both of them stretching her over one of the bikes to lick every inch of her skin. They parked up, got off the bikes, and both hugged her as she came to them. Nathan hugged her last, growling into her ear as he
censored
her just below her earlobe. "I'll get you back for that later, I promise." Swatting her bottom, he laughed as she jumped away. "So where are we going? Come on, one of you has to tell me." She was almost dancing in excitement. "We're going up to the castle over there. See it on the ridge top? That's where we're going." Luther pointed beyond her head. Turning around, she couldn't believe she hadn't noticed it before. A castle sat there, looking old and formidable still. "Cool. Great, let's get going. Which one of you am I going with?" She looked at both of them, waiting on an answer. "Hop on with me, Nathan might scare you. He's the wild one when riding a bike. I'll get you there safe. Put this helmet on, we can talk through a radio system in it while we're on our way." He handed her the helmet, helped her get it on, and then helped her onto the motorcycle. He climbed on in front of her, and they were all off, heading towards the castle. "So what are we going to do once we go back? Stop Nathan from dragging this prince to the wrong side of the tracks or something?" she asked. "Basically, it's all we can think to do. If it never happens, then your family won't get cursed and Nathan and I won't be stuck as immortals anymore. We've lived a long time, it's time to have a normal lifespan and go to our rest. There are a few of us left in the world, but not like there used to be. With surveillance and technology as it is now, it's hard to operate in a world where you're always under a microscope or satellite. Most dragonkin have a longer lifespan, about 150 years, but we've had a far longer one because of the curse. We hope to end that. But I don't want you to die," she cried into the helmet, gripping onto his back in front of her. "That's just it, Hannah. Everyone we know dies, but not us. It's time to go back to normal, though it has been fascinating over the years, watching everything change. We're just ready to have normal lives. We can't take the going on without our loved ones anymore." "I can understand that," she replied. She'd lost both of her parents now. She understood a little of what they'd experienced. Kind of. The rest of their trip was quiet, and they arrived at the castle before lunchtime. They parked in the car park and walked to a cafe on the castle grounds. "Coffee?" Nathan asked. Luther and Hannah agreed to a coffee and found a table away from other visitors. "What's the plan then?" Hannah asked as Nathan returned with 3 cups of coffee. "We have to go into the woods behind the castle. There's a place there we have to do this. We'll change your clothes first and send you out to find Nathan. You'll have to find a way to distract him. Then we'll come back and things should have changed. What do you think? Won't that cause a problem? I'll be a woman on my own in the 16th century. How am I going to find him? We can't go near ourselves. If we do, there will really be problems. You don't exist in that time period though, so you'll have to be the one that changes things. We will be following you though, and we'll protect you as best we can. Nathan won't know who you are in the past, but he'll feel a connection to you. You can distract him, and we know where he'll be, so just do what you can, okay? Only do what you feel comfortable doing too. You do have to remember though, this will change the future. So be careful. All right?" They'd been walking out to the forest as he spoke, and came to a clear spot in the trees. It was shaped in a circle, as if the trees had been planted deliberately to form this shape. The men had brought 2 bags with them. Nathan took clothes out of his bag, as Luther took 2 belts out of his. Nathan handed her the clothes, an elaborate gown, a chemise, head covering, and some other articles she couldn't figure out. I'm going to guess you two are more familiar with these items than I am. Can you help me? She asked after slipping out of her clothes and putting the chemise on. They helped her, layering the clothes properly until she stood before them in a gold, scarlet and black gown. They were arguing over her hair though, Nathan telling Luther the fashion he'd put in didn't exist at that time, Luther insisting it did. She laughed, two grown men arguing over a woman's hair fashion. How about if it doesn't exist, maybe I'm the reason it started? I won't be there long anyway, right? A day or two? I'll figure it out. Now what else are we to do? She put her phone in the waterproof bag they'd brought, along with her passport when a thought occurred to her. How is past Nathan going to understand me? She asked, making them both stop cold. Nathan turned to her, making a noise, but she wasn't sure what it was. He looked into her eyes, told her to concentrate and made the noise again. This time she heard it as, "You're beautiful." Her eyes went round, realizing she knew their language. She'd known it since last night and could speak it herself. She moved her,
censored,
using her entire mouth to form the sound that meant thank you, as she smiled at him. Awesome. Quickly the men put the belts on, guided her between them, spoke some words that weren't really words, one she did not understand at all this time, and then the world went dark around her. When she opened her eyes again, she was in the same woods but something was different. A sound was missing. Then she realized she could hear something else, metal against metal, animals bleeding but no cars or airplanes. Looking around, she saw two dragons in the now darkening woods, and knew they were Luther and Nathan. The Luther dragon looked at her, smiling even in dragon form, and pointed at his back with his head. She climbed on, and in her mind she saw herself climbing onto his waist. She lightly thumped the dragon, telling him to stop. Something that sounded like a laugh coughed out of the dragon. They flew in the darkness, not needing lights to guide them to the right part of the castle they needed to be near. They landed and the dragons became men again quickly, taking the belts off and putting them in the bags they had with them still. Hurrying over to a barn, they hustled Hannah inside, closing the door quietly. All right, you'll have to go into the castle in the dining hall. Both Luther and I will be in there. You have to distract Nathan at the very least. It's him that comes up with the idea of bringing Gunther over here. Are you ready? He didn't sound certain. He sounded worried actually, and she wasn't sure this was such a good idea. There were so many things that could go wrong. She tried to keep herself from thinking of them, but now she was feeling overwhelmed with doubt. Pulling her to him, Luther motioned Nathan over. Tell her what she needs to know. I'm easily distracted. Smile at me, sit by me, and I guarantee you'll have me eating out of your hands. In this time I was a little wilder, a bit naive, and a pretty woman could always take my attention. You'll be like a bomb going off for me though. Our attraction will pull even in this time. I could suggest a way to distract me, but that's up to you. I think you know what I mean. Nathan told her, looking a bit guilty. She knew what he meant, and if it meant saving them, saving her father and the others before her, those that may come after, she could steal a moment or two of pleasure with this man. She hugged them both and left before she could lose her nerve. Walking down the path to the castle, she ignored the dark places, walking past them with her head high, pretending to be a noble woman of high birth. Or what she thought one of those would be anyway. She entered the dining hall, the stench of the place overwhelming her senses. There was no Dettel in 16th century Europe, after all. There was also no electricity to make fans blow smoke away, or keep areas cool. The inside of the dining hall was hot and smoky. Hannah covered her face. She slowly got used to it but still wanted fresh air. She had a mission though, and she was determined to get it done. Hannah stood by the doors, looking out over the hall. She spotted Luther and Nathan's past selves at the end of a table and went over to them. They were dressed in finery, their hair grown out past their ears, cute little caps on their heads. Rings decorated every finger, and Hannah wasn't sure she'd seen such displays of wealth as she'd seen on the people sat around her. She went to the men and sat between them. Bold for a woman of this time perhaps, but she didn't know what else to do. She used the language she'd gained from them to greet them, doing far more to attract their attention than simply sitting with them had. Taking the role to the extreme, Hannah boldly spoke to them. I'm looking for 2 men to provide me with a bed and far more tonight. Are you 2 willing? Her cheeks burned as she spoke, but they immediately stood up, taking her hand and leading her out of the hall. They led her to a hall lined with doors and entered one. The windows were open in here, no fire going, but a large bed filled the room. Would my lady like a drink? Luther asked her. He seemed younger here, less sure of himself. Taking off his coat and shirt, she also noticed he didn't have a tattoo yet either. My name is Hannah, and yes, wine would be nice. Taking a sip, she found 16th century wine tasted slightly different from modern wine. She slugged it down, knowing she'd need her courage. She wasn't a virgin, but this was not something she'd done before. Hannah quickly learned Nathan was just as bold in the past as he was now, even if he too was tattooless and appeared slightly younger. Nathan had come up behind her, pulled her cap off, then the outer parts of her dress, leaving her in her chemise. She pulled the chemise off, accepting one more glass of wine from Luther as she did so.
This scene has been censored to provide a safe and enjoyable reading experience for everyone.
Her legs gave out then, and they carried her to the bed. They spent the next 2 days there, talking and learning about each other, but she never told them where she'd come from, or why she was there. Only about the place she was born, the town, how old she was, about her parents. And they made love often, sometimes only 2 of them at a time, all 3 of them at others. She fell in love with both men in those 2 days, and if she knew anything about the feelings she was getting from their future selves, they were falling in love with her as well. Finally, she woke one night, and could feel future Luther call to her with his mind. She knew it was time to leave. She did not want to leave these 2 lovely men, but knew their future selves were waiting for her, that her mission was done, and it was time to go back to her own world. She left a note, telling them she had to go and not to look for her, but that they would see her in the future. She left quietly, making her way to the barn the men were in. As she entered, they pulled her to them, each taking a turn in welcoming her back to them. Nathan pulled something out of his pocket, a note, tattered but now covered in plastic to keep it safe. The note she'd left them. They'd kept it all of these years. She
Censored.
The men, wanting only to learn about their new selves, to learn them all over again, but she knew they had to leave. They had to go back to their own future. Quickly the men put on their belts, changed form and flew her back to the woods. Going back to their own time didn't result in the blackout she'd experienced before, but her memories did shift, the new ones not taking the place of old memories, but somehow existing beside them together. She knew her parents were both still alive, that her whole life had been different, and that the world was different. Somehow darker, even with her parents' love to change how things were for her. Stepping into the castle, she saw a swastika on the side, a spotlight shining brightly on it, and knew that somehow they had all messed up. This was not the future they'd wanted to create. Chapter 4. A month passed. She'd called her parents to let them know she was safe, but that she could not come home yet, and that she was going to be staying in Germany a while longer. She spent her nights with Luther and Nathan, trying to work out a plan, and cried as her 28th birthday passed without a hitch. When they weren't planning, they were making love, and she would be happy if she knew that she hadn't completely screwed the world up. In the weeks that had passed, they'd learned that the men were still cursed, the tattoos having appeared on their skin when the curse was placed, still present. She and her family line, the fate of the world, were the only things that had changed. They couldn't do anything for a year. They had to wait because the men could only travel back in time once a year. The spell wouldn't work more than that for some reason. Hannah would have been despondent without Luther and Nathan there to pick her spirits up, to keep her going. She'd learned something today, however, that could change it all. The plan had originally been to go back, to stop past Hannah from going to the men, thus stopping the German army from winning World War II, for that is what had happened. The Germans had won and were still destroying the world, one country at a time. This was not something any of them could live with, and each wanted desperately to get back in time, to fix what they had broken. Now, though, the men might not want to do anything with her. They might want to change the plan, and she didn't know what to do about it. Walking into the bar, she got their attention, and they followed her back into the office. Sitting on the couch, she allowed Luther to pull her close, as Nathan took his usual spot at her feet. He loved her feet. "You're pregnant, darling. You know that now, right?" Nathan asked her. "Yes, but how did you know?" "I only found out for sure today," she exclaimed. "We're dragonkin, we know these things," Luther assured her. "Do you know whose it is? Past or present?" Hannah asked. "No, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. We have to change the past. If it's one of us, the future us that is, then the child will be conceived anyway. If not, we'll figure something out. Because the one thing we know is that we love you, but we can't let the world end up like this. We would both love this child, but we can't allow it to survive in this world. It's not fair to that poor baby. We just can't do it." Luther sounded as though he grieved the loss already, as though he knew the child already. Hannah wanted to scream, to cry, to hold her hands over her child and protect it, but she knew she could not. The world had to go back to how it was, and she had to sacrifice this child if that's what it took. That meant she'd give birth, have the baby, and get to know it before she had to go back and erase it. The urge to scream increased until she burst out crying, her tears breaking the hearts of the men who now loved her more than anything. "Dry your eyes, Hannah. We will fix this, I promise. It's a nightmare world we're living in at the moment. We created it with our meddling. But we have each other, and that will never change. We have one more chance and one other option. An option we haven't explored yet, but Nathan's been working on it. So dry your eyes, my love. It may take some time, but this will be sorted." Luther wiped the tears away.
Censored.
Her despite her messy face. "The one thing I'm going to cherish the most out of all of this, Hannah," Nathan spoke, "is that you became a part of our lives. The wonder of gaining memories as you made them. Remembering you in 2 different times with 2 different lives is a miracle I will never want to give up. Loving you is one of the rocks of my life now, and I would not trade it. But if it will dry your eyes, I'll give my own life. I have a meeting in a couple of weeks, and I believe we can fix everything then. I didn't want to give you false hope, but every day I believe I learn more, and I've come to realize that I caused this. I have to fix it. I'm leaving tonight to start my journey. It will take a while, but when I return things will either be fixed or it will be even better than it was to begin with. We'll just have to wait and see." Hannah reached to him, loving him just as much as she did Luther. How could she love them so quickly, so completely? She knew why. The experiences they shared built their love, built their trust in each other. These were her men, nothing could change that. Running her fingers over the dragon tattoo spreading over Nathan's.
Censored.
She pulled on his
Censored.
rings. He hadn't had them in the 16th century, but she'd learned how much having the rings tugged on blew his mind since her return. Reaching for him, she
Censored.
him deeply, letting him pull her into his lap at the other end of the couch. Luther moved to one of the chairs in the room, wanting them to have this moment to themselves. Nathan removed her clothing slowly, with care and practiced ease. Having her beneath him was one of his favorite things in the world. He loved her intensely, his every movement and touch a declaration of his love. From her head to the soles of her feet, he
Censored.
her caressed her and memorized the taste, feel and smell of her. His fingers knew every ridge of her skin when he was done. His
Censored.
knew its taste. Nathan went so far as to turn her over, loving the backside as much as the front. From her dark rose
Censored.
to her pert-ass cheeks, he knew her. He knew the mole below her right shoulder blade, the birthmark in the shape of an angel on the right side of her tummy, the scar on the sole of her right foot from a broken piece of glass. She was imprinted on his mind, his soul now, and he could go to his future knowing that she would be a part of him always. As he
Censored.
into her, as her pulsing body pleasured his nerve endings, he knew that he loved this woman more than any other person on earth, even more than Luther, and he would give his very life for her. His shout when he came was not only a shout of pleasure, it was triumph, understanding, and resignation. Beneath him, panting out her own enjoyment, Hannah opened her eyes as she came down from her own high. "Nathan," she screamed. Touching his
Censored.
She was amazed at what she saw. His tattoo had shrunk down, only covering his shoulder and arm now. His
censored
was completely bare. He looked down, confused at what he saw. Luther. Turning to look at his friend, his brother, his compatriot, he saw that Luther's tattoo had shrunk as well. What does this mean? Hannah asked the men. I could tell you. A female voice intruded on their shock, and they all looked to the office desk where the purple-headed vixen sat, looking at all of them with a pleased smile. Aaron? How did you get in here? What do you know about any of this? Luther asked his barmaid. Oh, for such old souls, you too can still make the common male mistake of seeing only what you want to see. I am Ire, the goddess of peace and mercy. I have been watching you for a while now, to see what changes you've gone through, to see what you have learned. Finally, you have learned the error of your ways, Nathan. You have learned love and remorse. That is all we deities have ever wanted. For you to learn, and finally you have. You destroyed 2 kingdoms out of your immaturity and uncaring ways. You destroyed lives. We decided to take one from you, that of your woman and your child. Yes, your child. That one belongs to you. Others in the future may not, but that one will be yours. Now look outside and watch. They all went to the window in the office, gasping and covering their eyes as a bright flash enveloped everything they could see, traveling out as though it were a tidal wave. In amazement they watched as the light surged away from them, the world changing around them as they gazed. The light somehow changed, the air cleared, lights came on in houses that had previously been dark, and houses appeared where none had existed. We've eliminated the curse, we've repaired the damage your little escapade caused, and we've turned you back to mortal dragonkin. But you will be the last of your kind. There will be no more dragonkin on this earth after you. Hannah and her line are no longer cursed, and the world can be a much better place than the future you created. Just make no more mistakes or we will come back. With that, Ire popped out of the room. She just disappeared. Then she came back. And keep an eye out for Loki, he's been at it again with his mischief. I'll be back to work on Monday. With that, she popped out for the last time. Luther, Nathan, and Hannah screamed their delight and joy, jumping up and down, hugging each other close. Hannah turned on the telly, and it was normal again, not a state-sponsored program meant for indoctrination. Her parents had a Facebook account, and were alive and well. She was still pregnant. Smiling at her men, at these 2 men she loved entirely, she knew that this was their final chance. They would and could make the most of it. Epilogue. 8 months later. Little Aiden slept in his bed, his green eyes closed peacefully in his sleep. He didn't know anyone else was in the room with him, or that it was a minor god there with him. Loki stared down at the child, mischief and mayhem in his mind. Waving his hand over the child's head, whispering a few ancient words and gazing intently, Loki watched as a birthmark appeared faintly on the child's left shoulder in the shape of a dragon. Loki laughed loudly, pleased with himself as the child burped, and a stream of smoke exited from his tiny mouth. Aiden's mother, thinking she'd heard someone in the room, came in to check on her baby, but not seeing anyone, she picked up her child and carried him out to his father's, content with her world. Thank you for reading my book. If you like this story, I think you'll enjoy my Bookshift Quickie. A big favor to ask. I would really love it if you could take a few seconds to leave me a review. Thank you so much in advance. About the author. Selina Coffey is a romance writer who lives happily in London with her husband and son. She is a hopeless romantic who grew up always believing in love, and she is not ashamed to admit this. It is this belief that makes her so passionate about writing crazy love stories. A stereotypical girly girl, she loves shopping. So whenever she gets a chance and the spare cash, you will probably find her browsing online for the next pair of shoes to add to her collection. You can find her online at www.selinacoffey.com. Contact her at hello@selinacoffey.com. Closing credits. This has been desired by 2 dragons. Written by Selina Coffey. Auto-narrated using Google technology. Copyright 2024 by Lovi Books Limited. Production copyright 2024 by Lovi Books Limited.